3 days before Marilyn Monroe died, her doctor wrote her a prescription. 25 capsules of Nembutal. Enough barbiturates to kill her twice over. He signed his name, handed her the paper, and sent her home. His name was Dr. Hyman Engelberg. He lived until 2005. 43 years after her death. 43 years to explain what he knew. 43 years to tell the truth about the prescription that ended her life. He never did. The silence of the people who could have saved her is part of the story. But it's not the beginning. The beginning is earlier, darker, and more systematic than one doctor's prescription. The beginning is the word they used to describe what they were doing to her. They called it treatment. The word matters. Because when you call something treatment, you're saying you're helping. You're saying the person is sick and you're making them better. You're saying your interventions are about healing. That's not what was happening to Marilyn Monroe. What was happening was the systematic management of a person whose authentic responses to her actual situation were inconvenient for a large number of people who had financial and personal stakes in her continued availability and compliance. The medication that was supposed to help her cope made her dependent. The dependency made her manageable. The management made her available. And the availability was what the whole system was actually organized around. She was not helped. She was managed. The distinction is the most important distinction in the story of Marilyn Monroe's last years, and it is the distinction that her death makes impossible to avoid. It started in the late 1940s. She was young, beautiful, desperate to succeed in an industry that devoured young women like fuel. She had grown up with profound insecurity, spending her early life in foster homes and orphanages, in conditions that taught her the ground could always disappear, that nothing was permanent, that the only reliable response to a threatening situation was vigilance and performance and the management of other people's perceptions. She was anxious. Of course she was anxious. Anyone with her history, facing the pressures of the studio system, would have been anxious. The anxiety was not pathological. It was the appropriate response to an actually threatening situation. But anxiety made her difficult to work with. Anxiety made her late to set. Anxiety made her ask questions, demand retakes, refuse to settle for performances that felt false. The studio needed her compliant. They needed her available. They needed her to show up on time, hit her marks, deliver the performance, and not cause problems. The first tools made available to her were pharmaceutical. This was not unusual in Hollywood in the 1950s. The studio system routinely medicated its performers, uppers for energetic performances, downers for sleep, the schedule otherwise prevented, everything calibrated to the needs of the production rather than the needs of the person. Judy Garland's story is the most famous example. MGM started giving her amphetamines when she was 15 years old to control her weight and keep her energetic. They gave her barbiturates to help her sleep after the amphetamines made sleep impossible. By the time she was in her 20s, she was addicted to both. Garland died at 47. Barbiturate overdose. Just like Marilyn. This was the system. This was normal. This was how Hollywood kept its assets functioning. For Marilyn Monroe, the medications were initially chloral hydrate and barbiturates, the category of drugs that would eventually kill her. She was prescribed them for insomnia, which was real and severe. She was prescribed them for anxiety, which was also real and severe. She was given them without adequate information about their addictive properties, without adequate monitoring of her dosage, without the sustained therapeutic support that might have addressed the underlying conditions rather than simply medicating their symptoms. Nobody told her that barbiturates change the brain, that they create a need for themselves that escalates over time, requiring larger doses to produce the same effect. Nobody told her that once the dependency developed, stopping would be dangerous, potentially fatal without medical supervision. She was given the prescriptions and sent back to the set. As her fame increased, the demands increased with it. More films, more public appearances, more photo shoots, more interviews, more performances of being Marilyn Monroe, the persona that required constant energy, constant availability, constant performance of desire and innocence simultaneously. The medications increased with the demands. More filming meant less sleep, meant more sleeping pills. More anxiety about the filming meant more pills for the anxiety. The pills for anxiety made her drowsy on set, so she needed pills to wake up. The pills to wake up made sleep impossible, so she needed more pills to sleep. The cycle reinforced itself. And nobody stopped it. Because the cycle was working exactly as intended, it kept her functioning. It kept her available. It kept her showing up and performing and generating the millions of dollars that her image produced for the studios and the photographers and the publicists and everyone else whose livelihood depended on Marilyn Monroe continuing to be Marilyn Monroe. The original problem, the anxiety, the insomnia, the profound insecurity born from a childhood of abandonment and institutional care, was never addressed. Only managed. The management creating new problems that were in turn managed with more of the same. By the late 1950s, she was taking barbiturates every night. Multiple pills. Quantities that would have alarmed any doctor actually monitoring her care. But she wasn't being monitored. She was being managed. Dr. Ralph Greenson is the most complex figure in this story. Her psychiatrist from 1960 until her death, he was a serious analyst, a respected professional, someone who genuinely seemed to care about his patient in ways that went beyond professional obligation. He also made choices that were, at minimum, deeply problematic. Greenson allowed himself to become embedded in her life in ways that went far beyond the therapist's role. He invited her to his home for family dinners. He introduced her to his wife and children. He arranged for Eunice Murray, a woman with psychiatric training who worked with several of his patients, to be hired as Marilyn's companion and housekeeper. Effectively, he extended his oversight into every aspect of her daily life. His rationale, as he expressed it in letters and notes found after her death, was that her isolation was so severe, her need for support so comprehensive, that ordinary therapeutic practice was inadequate. He believed she needed someone watching her, monitoring her, preventing her from making destructive choices. He was not entirely wrong about the severity of her need. The isolation was real. The vulnerability was real. But he was catastrophically wrong about the solution. What he created, with the best intentions, was a situation in which she became dependent on him in ways that replicated rather than resolved the core of her difficulties. She had spent her entire childhood dependent on institutions and foster families who could remove their care at any moment. She had spent her adult life dependent on studios and powerful men who controlled her career and her income. Now she was dependent on her therapist. And on his housekeeper. And on his family. All of them extensions of his authority, his oversight, his control. This was not healing. This was a new form of the same old trap. And Greenson knew about the pills. He knew the quantities she was taking. He wrote letters expressing alarm about her barbiturate dependency. He tried, at various points, to reduce her access. But the efforts were consistently insufficient to the scale of the problem. And they were consistently undermined by the fact that she had access to multiple prescriptions from multiple doctors, a not uncommon situation for celebrities who could afford multiple medical relationships and who had reached the stage of dependency where maintaining supply required careful management. The medication situation in the final months of her life was catastrophic. She had prescriptions from at least 3 different doctors. Dr. Greenson, her psychiatrist, Dr. Engelberg, her internist, and Dr. Lee Ziegel, another physician she consulted. None of them were fully coordinating with each other. None of them had complete information about what the others were prescribing. Or so they claimed afterward. The barbiturates, Nembutal in particular, were her primary dependency. She needed them for sleep. She was taking quantities that everyone around her knew were dangerous. Her friends knew. Her housekeeper knew. Her doctors knew. And nobody stopped it. Greenson tried to limit her access in the final weeks. He told Engelberg to reduce the prescriptions. He told Eunice Murray to monitor the pill bottles, to control when she could take them. But on August 1, 1962, 4 days before her death, Dr. Engelberg wrote her a prescription for 25 capsules of Nembutal. 25 capsules. Each one 100 milligrams. A lethal dose is generally considered to be around 1,500 milligrams, 15 capsules. He gave her enough to kill herself almost twice over. He has said, in the limited statements he made about her death, that he was not aware of the full extent of her dependency, that he didn't know about the other prescriptions she had active, that the coordination between her doctors was inadequate. Maybe that's true. Maybe the medical care of the most famous woman in the world was genuinely that poorly managed. Or maybe there's more to the story of that final prescription. More that was never investigated. More that the people who could have spoken about chose to keep silent. Dr. Engelberg lived until 2005, 43 years after her death. He never gave a comprehensive public account of his treatment of her, of what he knew and when he knew it, of why he wrote that final prescription, of what he thought would happen when he gave a barbiturate-dependent patient access to a lethal quantity of the drug she was addicted to. The silence of the people who could have saved her is part of the story. The official timeline of her final night is this. She spent the evening at home. She made phone calls to her friend Norman Rosten, to her former stepson Joe DiMaggio Jr., to Peter Lawford. The calls were described by the recipients as concerning, her voice slurred, her thoughts disconnected. Eunice Murray, the housekeeper Greenson had installed to monitor her, was in the house. She has given multiple, contradictory accounts of the evening. In some versions, she checked on Marilyn multiple times. In others, she went to bed early and didn't check until the middle of the night. At some point, the exact time has never been established, Marilyn Monroe ingested a quantity of Nembutal that the coroner would later assess as consistent with 40 to 50 capsules. 40 to 50 capsules. 2,000 to 5,000 milligrams of barbiturates. Enough to kill her 3 or 4 times over. The coroner's verdict was probable suicide. The investigation was, as has been exhaustively discussed in the decades since, inadequate. The crime scene was compromised. The timeline doesn't make sense. Key evidence was lost or destroyed. Whether the quantity was self-administered, or administered by other means, or involved in circumstances more complex than simple suicide, has never been definitively established. Because the investigation didn't establish it, didn't try hard enough, didn't ask the right questions, didn't push back against the powerful people who had an interest in the story being simple and being over quickly. But what is not in question is this: the system that was supposed to protect her had failed her completely. Not in one dramatic moment. Not because of one bad doctor or one wrong prescription. Across years. Across multiple doctors. Across a studio system that prioritized her availability over her health. Across a medical establishment that saw her as an asset requiring maintenance rather than a person requiring care. She had asked for help. Repeatedly, in different ways, with different people. She had been aware, in her clearest moments, that what was happening to her was not treatment but management. And she had been frightened by the gap between what she needed and what she was receiving. She was 36 years old. She had been dependent on barbiturates for more than a decade. She had been treated by doctors whose priorities were shaped by studios, by powerful men, by financial interests that had nothing to do with her well-being. She had been prescribed medications without adequate monitoring. She had been managed rather than healed. She had been kept functional at the cost of everything that made functioning worthwhile. She deserved real treatment. She deserved doctors whose first obligation was to her. She deserved a medical establishment that saw her as a person with a history and a psychology and needs, not as an asset requiring maintenance so it could continue generating revenue. She was trying to get well. Despite the inadequate care, despite the structural failures, despite the system designed to keep her medicated and available rather than healthy and free, she was trying. The recognition of what was happening to her, the clarity about the gap between management and care, the determination to speak publicly about what Hollywood had done to her, this was real, hard-won understanding. She was not simply a passive victim. She was also someone fighting, in the ways available to her, for her own health and her own life. She deserved to win that fight. She deserved the resources and the genuine care and the structural support that would have made winning possible. She did not receive them. And on August 5, 1962, she was found dead in her bedroom, a phone in her hand, empty pill bottles on the nightstand, her body filled with enough barbiturates to kill her 3 times over. Dr. Hyman Engelberg lived until 2005. 43 years of silence. Dr. Ralph Greenson died in 1979. 17 years after her death. His family has protected his papers, limited access to his notes, maintained that he did everything he could to save her. Eunice Murray, the housekeeper, changed her story multiple times over the years. Gave different timelines. Different accounts of who was there, what was said, when the body was discovered. She died in 1994, taking whatever truth she knew with her. The studio executives who had medicated her, the directors who had demanded her availability, the powerful men who had controlled her career, they moved on. Made other movies. Managed other stars. The system that had killed her continued exactly as before. Because it was working. It had always been working. Not for her, but for everyone else. That's what we carry when we carry her story. The obligation to see the people in our own time who are being managed rather than cared for. Who are being medicated into compliance rather than supported toward health. Who are being kept functional at the cost of everything that makes functioning worthwhile. She refused, in the end. In the notebooks where she wrote about what was being done to her. In the planned press conference where she intended to speak publicly about the abuses of the studio system. In the determination that had moved her beyond concern for personal consequences. She refused to keep pretending the management was medicine. She refused to protect the people who had failed to protect her. We can learn that from her. We should. The pills they called treatment killed her. But before they killed her, they kept her working. Kept her available. Kept her generating millions of dollars for people who saw her as an asset rather than a person. That was the point. That was always the point. And until we're willing to see that clearly, willing to name it precisely, willing to recognize when management is being called medicine in our own time, we're complicit in the same system that killed her. She deserved better. We owe her the obligation to demand better. For everyone still being managed. Still being medicated into compliance. Still being told that the pills are treatment when the pills are actually control. The prescription that killed her was signed 3 days before she died. But the system that killed her had been in place for years. And it's still operating. Still calling management medicine. Still prioritizing function over health. Still killing people. We know better now. We have to do better. She deserved to live. She deserves to be remembered not just as a tragedy but as a warning. A warning about what happens when we mistake management for care. When we prioritize availability over well-being. When we let powerful systems decide that some people's health matters less than their function. She tried to tell us. In her final months, in her notebooks, in her determination to speak publicly about what had been done to her. We should have listened then. We need to listen now.